There's a California woman who has figured out a really, really cool way to make a living. She gets to get $750,000 a year as a base salary. And her job is apparently to make California much more likely to burn down in fire season, which shouldn't be a thing. Fire season. I mean, if you're properly stewarding forests, it shouldn't be a thing. I want you to hear her words. Her name is Jessie Quinones. Base salary $750,000 per year. And she's about to explain to you a very interesting aspect of the California fires. That when we had our friend Chris Bray on the program earlier, Chris talked about being in a neighborhood where his friend's house had burned down, but not his shop, and there was not one fire truck for 2-3 hours while they stood there. Even his homes were burning. Local journalists talking to Karen Bass, the beleaguered and absolutely corrupt mayor, who, by the way, was on the short list to be vice president instead of Kamala Harris, because it happens that this mayor is also black. Local journalists saying to Karen Bass, we drove around for 3 hours. We didn't see a single fire engine. She is out explaining that things are all really, really happy. I'll show you this in a second. When you look at the decrepit way California has allowed its infrastructure to become, and they're all still in happy talk, think about your own body as you age. There are processes that are unavoidable as we age. One of them is joint degradation. If you've been any sort of runner or athlete or skier, you might be coming up upon that time where you're having doctors start to talk to you about, you might one day need to look at some knee replacement surgery. You might be even a bike rider. It's a hip thing with bikers. It's a hip thing, lower back thing with golfers. If you've done a lot of this, it's repetitive, and it eats away at the joints. And the medical world is happy to pay or have you pay for surgery or pills. But this is predictable, just like the infrastructure in Los Angeles was predictable. Things age, things break. It doesn't need to be that you wait until they break. If you could not have surgery, if you could not ever have to do that, if you could get the cartilage in your knee rebuilt naturally without a stint of surgery, would you do that? I think it'd be worthwhile. Go check out my friends at Renew.Healthcare in Mexico. They use ethically gathered stem cells from placentas and umbilical cords, and it can regrow muscle, tendon, cartilage. It tackles inflammation. It destroys it. So those things that you're starting to hear of, hey, you might need to stop skiing. One day it might be a knee replacement. You might need to have cartilage surgery. Even if you can't use insurance there, and you can't because insurance hates things like this because they'd far rather work with their fellow board members to push you down the pharma surgery route, it still can save you money and certainly pain. Go to renew.healthcare. It's RENUE.healthcare. Please tell them you're part of the Todd Herman Show family. This woman's base salary is twice what the President of the United States earns. $750,000 per year base salary to manage the water in and around Los Angeles.
We ran out of water in the first tank at about 4:45 p.m. yesterday. We ran out of water in the second tank about 8:30 p.m. and the third tank about 3 a.m. this morning. Those tanks help with the pressure on the fire hydrants and the hills of Palisades. And because we were pushing so much water in our trunk line, and so much water was being used before it can get to the tanks, we were not able to fill the tanks fast enough. So the consumption of water was faster than we can provide water in our trunk line. So I want to make sure that you understand there's water on the trunk line. It just cannot get up the hill because we cannot fill the tanks fast enough.
What is the number of hydrants that could not get water because of these pressure issues? What percentage of the system in Pacific Palisades wasn't getting serviced at that point?
We were trying to keep water at all altitudes on the Palisades, and I think about 3 in the morning, that's when the hydrants went dry above the Brentwood area. We are able to push water on that trunk line on the east side of that. And we have some water on higher elevations, 16 to 18,000, but at 3,000, at 3 a.m., all of the fire hydrants went dry in the Palisades.
She knew that the big reservoir around Pacific Palisades, everyone knew in that business, was empty. It could hold 117 million gallons of water. So a covering apparently broke to cover the reservoir to keep the water safe. So they didn't fix it. Because when things break, they can't be fixed. So they let the water go dry. $750,000 a year to let the water go dry. At least she's got a lot of experience in this. Water management. Having come from an electrical company, Pacific Gas and Electric, which was sued for their role in helping to cause some of the last big worst fires. Small in comparison to this one. So she's got to have a ton of experience in, well, helping to start fires. $750,000 per year. President Trump was once fact-checked by the Associated Press, who hates you and hates me. The AP fact-checked Trump's wildfire tweets are not grounded in facts. The facts. Trump's point is irrelevant to battling wildfires. Fire suppression is not limited in any way by the availability of water, Westerling said, the person they're quoting this article. How does President Trump to propose that these waters be used to reduce fire risk? Is he proposing to build a statewide sprinkler system with federal money? The presence of water reduces fire risk because when a spark lands on your lawn, you can use your garden hose to put that out. Green lawns don't burn as easily as dried lawns. Being able to quickly dispatch high capacity, high pressure sprinklers like they do in Japan, where they build them into house designs, actually does save lives and property. So the inept Janice Quinones at her $750 a year is joined, of course, by the inept Karen Bass. The inept and grievously out of touch Karen Bass, of course, famously was in Ghana while the city she is mayor over was burning down. Now she's making bizarre videos. If you're not watching this, please later go click the show notes. Please watch this. If you're watching it, do you notice a disconnect between the facial images and body language with Karen Bass and the topic at hand?
Angelinos, we're still going through it. And to any of you and all of you that have experienced a loss, the grief, the anger, the just utter shock.
Do you see her smiling? I guarantee she's reading this. I can tell by watching her eyes move. Someone put this statement up in front of her, and they told her to smile. Here's why. Because she's not to blame. Because she's the happy cheerleader. Watch as this continues from her own Twitter channel.
I've seen the devastation. It is unbelievable the amount of loss that people have experienced. But we have to get through this crisis, and I know that we will. I was at the Sylmar command post today, and I saw the work of our first responders and how they've been able to defeat the fires in certain areas. We know we still have much more to go.
Is she going to mention the airplanes they had to bring in from Canada to scoop up water from the ocean? Because though they border the ocean, they don't have any way built into the infrastructure to draw water out of the ocean. In the case of an emergency need of water, they had to borrow 2 airplanes from another country far up north. Certainly firefighters are heroic when they could be. But when they didn't have water, there was little they could do. But it's her happy talk, her happy face, that's so incredibly insulting and instructive.
No, the winds are going to kick up again, but we got to stick together. We got to stand strong. And then we have to rebuild our city. We're the nation's second largest city, one of the greatest cities in the world. And we stay together and we will rebuild an amazing city. So thank you, Angelinos. And my thoughts and prayers are out to all of you that are going through unbelievable loss and pain today. We will get through this. Thank you.
Incidentally, that was timed at a very specific time length to fit into a YouTube stream in a very specific way. It was written that way. Ron DeSantis was asked by a reporter about President Trump's terrible criticism of Governor Newsom because it's very, very unordinary, very out of the ordinary, very bizarre. It's wrong in a democratic society. It's dangerous for democratic institutions for Donald Trump to critique the performance of the dictator of California. And DeSantis wasn't having it.
The president-elect or a president to be criticizing.
Is it appropriate for people in your industry to try to create division and to try to create narratives anytime these things happen? Now, you're not as interested in doing that because Newsom is a D. If Newsom was a Republican, you guys would go you would have him nailed to the wall for what they're doing over there. And I know we've dealt with it. We just assume in Florida, anytime something happens, it's going to be politicized by the media. So you guys sitting in judgment of Donald Trump, I mean, excuse me, I think your track record of politicizing these things is very, very bad.
Okay, last question.
Newsom should resign and that the wildfires are all his fault. So do you agree with those comments?
I remember when we had the Surfside Tower collapse, I had people from the Washington Post trying to blame me for it immediately without having any facts or anything. Oh, he didn't declare a state of emergency. First of all, state of emergency doesn't mean you can't respond. It's all that. Excuse me?
Biden did it. I think that's what you said.
Well, but what I'm telling you is you guys are trying to make an issue of it when I have watched from this seat. In fact, when I got elected governor, I was meeting with some of the other Republican governors, and what they would say is, hey, if you have a natural disaster, just know media's coming at you, they're going to do it. It's not the same. That mayor of LA, if that were a Republican mayor, I could only imagine what that would do. I mean, you know the fires are at high risk, and you try to go to Africa or wherever she was to go on some type of voyage. You should have been there preparing and doing that, and yet I don't see a lot of heat being directed in that thing. And so, you know, I'd like to see some balance on how this is done. You could criticize the president-elect, but I think you also have to hold these other people accountable, and I have not seen that.
Remember when Ted Cruz flew to Mexico when there were storms in Texas? Do you remember that was a headline? Of course, Ron DeSantis is right about this, and Republicans have been far, far behind the curve in making sure that they understand the Mockingbird media is their enemy. They're not journalists. They're not there to be journalists. They're the enemy, and to treat them that way.